Hello everybody, today I'm going to be going over the wind turbine experiments. So I'm going to be stepping through each experiment just to give you a demonstration of how to go about completing them. Alright, so first off we're going to start with experiment number 1. This experiment is all about how to construct a complex object inside of Unity with multiple primitive objects. So this is important because it's going to allow us to move and manipulate multiple objects by just affecting that higher up parent object, right? So all the children will be affected as well. So to go ahead and get started with this project, let's go ahead and create a new scene. So inside of your project here, that's going to be located in your working folder. For example, here would be your working folder, right? So you put your work inside there. That should be the project you're working in. All right. So inside Unity, we'll go File, New Scene. And let's go ahead and save this. Save Scene As, and let's just call this Wind Turbine. And what we should just go ahead and do now, just to keep everything organized, let's just create a new folder. All right, and let's call this Wind Turbine Experiments. This is just to keep us organized, especially when working in Perforce. So let's go ahead and save that scene there. All right, so now you see this Wind Turbine Experiments folder. Now if we go back to Perforce and we open up our project, now I'm in a different folder structure. I'm in a sandbox, but same thing, you'll be inside your working folder. And now when I come to my workspace, I open up my assets folder, you see that folder now. All right, there it is with our scene in there, just how we want it. So let's go back to Perforce, or back to Unity, and let's go ahead and continue on with the experiment. All right, so the first thing we need to do is create our pivot, our base object that's going to be rotating the blades of our wind turbine. So let's go ahead and create a game object. Let's create a sphere. All right, and press F to frame it up. And now we want to go ahead and put its position at the world to the origin. So 0, 0, 0 in the position. Okay, perfect. And while we're here, let's go ahead and name this pivot. Always important to name your game objects so you don't end up with a bunch of objects just named game object in your scene, or cube, or sphere. Always important to make sure you keep your scene organized. All right, now from here we want to create our blades. All right, so let's create a 3D object and a capsule. Now if you notice there, because I had my pivot object selected, it created that capsule at that same location. So important little key to note, make little shortcuts like that rather than having to move it into place or type in the values. You can select an object and the second one will be created at that same location. All right, now let's adjust this to make it look more representative of what a blade would be. All right, so let's scale it 3 in the Y and 0.25 in the Z. Okay. And while we're here, let's just name this blade instead of capsule. All right, now we have our pivot and our blade object. So the next thing we want to do is we want to parent this object to the pivot. So to do so, you just select it in the hierarchy and drag it and let go inside of the pivot. You'll notice a little arrow that pops up and lets you see that the blade is now inside of this object, or it's the child of the pivot. So now I can select the pivot object and move it and rotate it, and it's all behaving, whatever's going on with that parent object, it's also applying that to the children. So now let's go ahead and duplicate our blade 2 times and give each one a rotation. So rotate one in positive 60 degrees, rotate the other negative 60 degrees. All right, now we have this awesome flower looking device here, but let's go ahead and move these into position. So you'll notice that up here at the top you have the option for local and center, right? So these are 2 different options you have. So I'm going to select one of these other blades. Here when I'm in local space, you're going to see that these axes are following this object, right? So to move it vertically, it's going to be moving with the object in the same direction. It's important to notice because if I'm in global space, now the widget has arrows that are pointing with the actual world space, right? So Y is pointing up in the world, X is to the right, Z is into the screen. So this makes it much harder to move the object into place like this. You don't want to be doing movements like that. So using the local space, it'll allow you to move it along the axis that you'd like, along the axis that the object is oriented in. So moving these guys into place, get something that looks more like a wind turbine. All right, looks good. So now we want to just do a little test before we go forward. So let's go ahead and rotate that pivot. So when you rotate it, you notice everything moves together, gives it that nice flow, that nice smooth rotation that we're looking for. All right, let's go ahead and save our scene before anything crazy happens. Make sure we always save our work. Now let's move on, and we want to create the base that this will be attached to. So we need to create a cube and a cylinder. All right, so first let's go ahead and create the cube. All right, and let's call this head. So as I mentioned before, how I didn't have any object selected, now it put this object in a slightly off location. So let's go ahead and zero all this out. Okay, and now I want to slide this into place. Let's name this head. Alright, and then let's create a cylinder. And a stalk. Alright, and now let's go ahead and make the, make sure it's named properly. Now we want to make sure that we get this into place. And now we want to make, oh, that didn't save. We want to make the head the child object of the stalk. Okay. Alright, perfect. Now you'll notice we have these two separate objects. We want all this to be grouped together into one game object that we can either make a prefab of or make easy for other users or yourself to move around and put in different locations. So what we want to do is in our hierarchy, let's go ahead and create an empty game object. So one thing to keep in mind, this is still a game object. There's no difference between an object or a 3D mesh or a light, a camera. It's all just a game object. So this is just something empty that doesn't have any mesh represented to it, but it allows us to keep our scene organized or reference this in some way. So let's go ahead and just call this wind turbine. This is going to be the overall object of everything that's grouped together. All right, and definitely be sure to make this one zeroed out and be at the origin before we go ahead and make it the parent of everything else. So from here, you can drag and drop these in individually, or you can hold down Control and click to select multiple objects. And now I can just drag both of these into the wind turbine. All right, and so now you'll notice I can move around the wind turbine and everything moves with it. Everything's going just how I want it. So next, we want to make sure that our pivot for that object, for the wind turbine, is in a place that makes sense and it's easy for us to maneuver and utilize when placing it in the world. So to do so, we want to just move the children objects into place, and the wind turbine will stay in the same location. So keep in mind where my widget is. You'll see that right now it's at the origin, it's at the base of the world. So as I move these objects, right, and I want to get the base as close to the origin as I can. That looks good right about there. So now I select my wind turbine. That pivot is still at the base, it's still in the world there. So I can move it over just a little bit if I want to. You don't have to get too picky about this, but the whole point to understand is that I didn't move this wind turbine object. See, it's still at 0, 0, 0, even though the wind turbine's in a different location now. This just allows me to move it down here, maybe make some rotations. It's much more manageable location than from, say, in the center here. All right, now just for a final test, let's go ahead and rotate our pivot one more time just to make sure nothing broke. All right, everything looks good. The stalk isn't moving, the head isn't moving. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and save our scene. Awesome. Now, a really important step here is we want to make sure we're checking our work into Perforce. Because it's one thing just to do all this work, but if you're not submitting your work to Perforce, you're really missing out on an important step and something that you should be definitely being diligent about, to making sure that if anything ever happens, you're always having your work onto the server. At least every half hour, make sure you're doing this. But very easy just to come over to Perforce, right click on this folder, mark it for add. All right, I'm just going to be adding the wind turbine experiments folder to Perforce. You'll notice a little plus sign got added next to the two files. Now I just right click on this and submit. Right, lots of different ways to do the same thing on Perforce. Right, so it popped up this window here. I could come over to this pending list, and now you see I have these two files in here, and I could go ahead and hit submit here. Still doing the same thing. You can come over here and let's see, actions, submit. Right, a lot of the same things in the same, doing the same action, but just in different locations. All right, so I'll go ahead and submit that. Awesome. So definitely make sure that you're doing that. So in between each experiment, at least submit your work. Make sure that you're doing so and making sure you're practicing your Perforce skills, because in upcoming months, it's going to be very important that you understand that piece of software. So that's the end of experiment 1. If you'd like to import these packages that are on the server for you, so here in the entryway folder, you have these packages. What these are just completed. So experiment 2, this is what you'd start experiment 2 with. So it's just the completed experiment 1. If you want to compare yours to the scene, make sure nothing's wrong or different. And then experiment 3 has some sound effects and other things. So you don't necessarily need experiment 2. I'm just going to continue working on my same scene here. But if you'd like to import it, feel free, but not necessary for this one. So on to experiment number 2. This is all about how to animate objects in Unity, right? Now we have our wind turbine working, we want to make sure we have some animation attached to this, some type of motion. All right, so the first thing we want to do is set up those animations, and then later on we're going to be able to control when those happen based on any player actions. So for a simple setup like this, the wind turbine has two different states, right? An on mode and an off mode. So that means we're going to have two different animations. Our off mode is just going to be an idle state, let's call it, where it's just the object at rest, so no movement on it. And then we're going to need it when it's actually spinning. So let's go ahead and set those up. So to do so, we want to go to our animation window. Window, animation. All right, it seems to not open on me. It's a good thing though. It's given me a chance to troubleshoot. So I'm opening up the animation window, but it doesn't seem to happen. So one way that I would go about trying to troubleshoot and fix this is I'm just going to go to Layouts, and I'm going to go to Default right here. Okay, so not too much has changed, but now let's see if I try this again. Still nothing. The animator window works. What about animation? Well, it must be open somewhere. Alright, so I tried restarting Unity, still no luck. I'm going window, animation, nothing's happening. But for some reason I found a workaround. I can right click, add tab, animation. And it opens up the animation tab. Now I can pull it off. So maybe this was really tiny or somewhere, so I couldn't find it, but sorry about that little delay, but just those little opportunities are nice because it shows that if the program isn't working for you, don't panic, don't freak out, just try and find a workaround, and nothing to stress out about. So right back on it now. So I opened up my animation window finally, and now you'll notice that it says no animatable object selected. So what this means is you can just select an object in your scene, and now you can put animations on it. So the object that we want to animate is the pivot object, right? That's the one we've been testing and rotating around. So to begin it, now you'll notice this changes. To begin animating, create an animator and an animation clip. Okay, so we're going to need two things for this to actually animate. An animator and an animation clip. So let's go ahead and click create. Alright, and I'm going to put everything in this Wind Turbine Experiments folder. This is going to make it very easy for you to submit your work to Perforce and keep yourself organized. So make sure you're doing this. So the first animation we want to create is an idle. This is going to be an off state for our wind turbine. Alright, so name it idle. Now you'll notice that we have our timeline here. You can, this little red bar, you can grab this and scrub through the timeline here. This is where you're going to see your motion happening. Here you're going to see, this is where you can select your different clips. So an actual motion, the animation itself is a clip. That's the terminology that Unity uses. And here we want to add a property. Alright, so what is it that we're trying to actually animate? This is what you want to think about. So is it the rotation? Is it the scale? Is it the movement? Is it the collider? Is it the animator? I don't think so. Or the render? None of that. No, we don't want to animate that. We just want to animate the rotation. So your basic movement's going to be in here. But if you had any other thing, any other property about your object, this is where you could actually manipulate it and rotate it. So we just want to add the rotation. So you can go ahead and hit this plus here. And now you're going to notice this this line gets added here in these two diamonds on the start and the end. And then when you click on them, they're blue. These are our keyframes. This is what Unity uses to represent them. And now you'll notice this record button that's here. So if you hover over this, what this means is it says our scene and inspector changes recorded into the animation curves. So when it's down, it's recording. When it's on, it's recording. So any movement you make in here will be directly into this animation. So we don't want to touch anything yet. So for the idle, we want it to be no movement at all. Perfect. We're done with that first animation. Now we want to have one for when it's actually rotating. So let's go to our clips and create a new clip. Make sure you're still in your wind turbine experiments folder, and let's name this one spinning. Let me make sure that. Yep. Double checking, making sure I'm following instructions. Alright, and now in here, we want to add some movement to this. Alright, so when it's at this location, let's see, we want to go to 1 second, 360 degrees. Okay. So now you can scrub through your timeline here, and you notice that you have some motion going on. And you'll notice right when I typed in that 360 degrees, I had two keyframes that had popped up. So this one doesn't look like it's at a value of 0, which I want to make sure I have, because if I hit play right now, and you can't even notice it, it's so small that there's a little bit of popping, but if this, say, was at a value of 60, to really make it obvious, and I hit play, there's a little bit of that popping, so you don't even, it's not looping all the way. So we want to make sure that this value at the beginning is 0, very important, and this value here is 360. So that way if you hit play, you get a really smooth movement. It's not, it's looping over and over again, right? And it's very seamless. That's what we want in our animations. All right, so that's what we're looking for there. All right, let's go ahead and save our scene. Make sure nothing goes wrong. All right, and now that we have our animations created, what we need to do now is tie those to different states of the actual wind turbine. So we want to go to our animator window. So the animation window is where you do your actual animating of the objects. And the animator here, this is how you will create the different states and how they will transition from one to another. So this is what Unity refers to as mechanim. So each time we create a new animation clip, a new state is going to be created in here with the same name. So let's select our pivot object, and here you're going to see the different states. So we have spinning, and we have idle, right? Those are our two states that we have. And now over to the left, if I can make this a bit larger, there we go. You're going to see this exit state. Right, in this entry state. So what entry is, this just represents that as soon as we hit play in our scene and this animator becomes active, because you can turn animators on and off, just like you can any other component, this entryway will be, or this entry, sorry, will become the active point. So as soon as the level starts or this animator becomes active, the idle state is going to what it's going to go into. And now over here, you're going to notice that the clip itself has already been plugged into the motion. So this motion here is where you would plug in your actual animation clip. So say if for some reason I wanted to create a new state, right? If I wanted to name it something and put in a motion, this is where I would do it. Just go ahead and remove that. All right. And if you're not already having this arrow connected here, you can right click on this and set state machine default state. So this will allow you to drag it, say I want to make spinning my default state, and have it on, and then have it, maybe the player needs to turn it off for some reason. That's one way that you could change that. Alright, so we're not going to mess with the layers at all. So over here on the left-hand side of the animator window, you'll see layers and parameters. We're not going to mess with layers right now, something that's a bit more advanced for what we're doing. Let's go to just the parameters. This is something we're going to be using. Okay, so we're going to be adding a parameter. Alright, and then let's create a boolean. And let's call this toggle spin. Alright, that's going to be necessary because that's going to tie directly into when making transitions between idle and spinning. So in here, inside this window, you can right click on your idle state and you just make transition. So you're going to see that same arrow as I showed before. Now I can drag it and connect it to the actual spinning object. Alright, or the spinning state. Now do the same thing going back, right? Because now this is going to allow us to go from off to on. Now we also want to be able to go from on to off, right? We want to give that functionality. So right click, make transition, and click on your idle state. Alright, and now what that parameter that we just created is going to do, and what it's going to tie into with these, is it's going to allow us to have something to control when it transitions from one state to the other. So clicking on this transition, you'll see this small list over here. This opens up an inspector, and it gives you properties all about your actual transition, right? So there's a lot of settings you can mess with in here, and the Unity documentation is great if you want to get more into animation, if this is something you're really passionate about and you enjoy. But now here inside the conditions list, we're going to go ahead and add a new condition. And right away it already grabs that parameter that we created, toggle spin, and this gives us the option. Now because we chose a Boolean, just a true or false value, we only have two options. So we're going to go ahead and toggle spin is true for this this transition. Alright, now we want to do the same thing for the other way. Have this transition have a condition of when toggle spin is false. So when we set toggle spin to true, it should transition to the spinning state. When we set toggle spin to false, it should transition back to the idle state. So let's go ahead and save our scene. Alright, back to the scene view. Now I'm going to pull off this animator window just to make a point of something. So here I'm going to have these side by side. Okay. So you see here my toggle spin, you see my two states, and you see the wind turbine. So let's go ahead and play. And I'm going to go back to scene mode because my camera isn't where I want it. And something looks to be pretty funky. My idle state isn't playing properly. So maybe that has something to do with my animation. Let's go back to my animation. So one way I can do that is I can just double click on my idle. Is that not going to allow me? Animation? No. Huh. Okay, it looks like I've got some other keyframes in here, so that's not what I want. Not too sure how that happened, but it's okay. Let's just go ahead and delete these. You just right click on this top one and delete key. So let's pull this off as well. So let me slide through this and hit play. Now there should be no motion at all. Okay, looking good. Okay, so let's close this window, because when that's open it's going to be recording. So maybe that window is open somewhere and I tried to move it and it recorded that, but no worries, that should update this as well because this is just tied to that state. Or sorry, this state is tied to this animation clip. So let's go ahead and hit play again. Right, back to scene mode. Alright, just what we want. See, now you'll notice, sorry, back on track again, but no worries, troubleshooting is always a good thing. Idle, see, now we're staying in this idle state. You'll see this blue bar running through this animation over and over again. Nothing is happening, but that is because it's set to false. If I click this toggle spin checkbox, you'll notice that I transition into the spinning state. Now my object is rotating in the spinning state, playing that clip how I want to, and it's all tied on this switch right here. So now I can turn this off again, or set this to false, and now you'll notice it transitions again. Now I'm in the idle state. So now we have this object animating, and we have it on a switch. Us as someone using this program, we're able to manipulate this, and now we want to get it to where the user, whoever is playing in the world, is able to do so, right? So we're going to need a script to go forward from here, but that is the end of experiment 2. So the last thing we should do is go ahead, save our scene, save the project, and let's go back to Perforce. And now let's go ahead, and since I've already added my wind turbine, but you see all my new files are here. Here's my idle animation, the animating or the spinning animation, as well as the pivot controller. So what this controller is that animator that we created. Inside Unity, you see it right here, this pivot animator. This is important because it keeps all this information for these transitions, the different states, how they're linked together. All this information is stored in this game asset. So this is really important. That's a part of our project on the server. So I'm just going to right click on Wind Turbine Experiments, and I'm going to reconcile offline work. All right, so that popped up. It found some files. So it found all these files that were added. So reconcile there. You'll see them pop up in my change list. Right click on my change list and submit. Always being very descriptive. Make sure that you're not just writing in short little sentences. Keep the detail and good practice for when you're working with larger groups. All right, so that's the end of experiment 2. So now on to experiment 3, where we're going to start talking about colliders, as well as source audio, and implementing that into the actual game, and now allowing the user, someone that's playing through this experience, to basically turn this switch on and off. That's what we want, right? We want the player to be able to toggle this based on their game actions. So using setups like this as a reward or some type of objective, and really tying the whole experience together. So for this last experiment, we're going to need that package from Perforce. So inside of your IND folder, right? So this here, Turbine Experiment 03 package. So if you've gotten the latest, which you should have already, of this IND content folder, you have this on your computer. So you should be able to just inside Unity, right click, import package, custom package, navigate to your IND wherever your workspace is, go in your content, entryway, Turbine Experiment 03. All right, now I've found a bunch of files for us. So what we really need, honestly, for this is the 2 sound files, right? Because we've already created these idle, spinning, and pivot controller. We still have our scene. So again, this is just here for you if you want to start this at a very fresh base. If you think maybe you made a mistake, or you just want to make sure yours is exactly where it should be, feel free to just import this whole thing and start working in this scene. But for the instance of this, I'm only going to import the 2 sound files. That's what we need for getting this final experiment working. So I'm going to go ahead and import that. Okay, and my naming was slightly different, so it's in a different folder. What I'm actually going to do is just drag these into my wind turbine experiments, where I've had everything, right? So now I have my click and my wind loop. And the only reason I moved those is just for my own sanity and perforce, so I'm going to delete this folder. But keep that whole folder if you want all of that as a reference. Maybe it's best for you to have all of that as a reference for later on, especially because this is going to tie directly into the entryway. This is what this is all about, is being able to animate this and get this to work will definitely allow you to be successful in the entryway assignment. So I'm just going to go ahead now and go back to Perforce and add my sounds. So here we go. Found my 2 sounds there. Add those. Oh, actually, that was that. And so I'm just going to reconcile that. It's a little faster. All right, found those for add. Submit. So you're noticing how often I'm going back and forth between Perforce. I just like that. I really have fallen into that habit in the last 5-6 years, and it's always been great. You're never going to lose any work, and especially when you start working on a lot more complex setups and a lot more moving pieces, and you're collaborating with your teammates. Really get in the habit of doing so. Alright, so getting started here, we're going to need a few different, see, I'm going to close that, we don't need that for now. We're going to need a few other assets in here just to help us out be able to test this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create, I'm going to use some level blocking meshes. I'm going to create a cube. I'm going to put it at 0, 0, 0 because I know that's where the wind turbine is. Now I'm going to scale it, and we're just making a floor, something to walk on. Alright, and now we're going to also need a small little control panel. So I'm just going to use another cube. So that. Alrighty, put it right there. And just to make this a little easier on our eyes, I'm going to texture this, just sort of throw material on this. So it's inside the ASCOR folder, there's some materials. I'm just going to pick, I don't know, Jenga. Cool. Serves the purpose. That's what we need. Also, to test it out, we're going to need a character. So we can search for ASCOR, right? And ASCOR character container 1 is the one we're looking for. So this contains two objects basically to get everything functioning, to get our third-person functionality, and as well as the camera switching with the grav null and all the fun stuff. We have two objects that this made up of: the camera and then the character itself. So we put it in a prefab just to make it easy to drag and drop into multiple different scenes. So let's go ahead and save this. And everything cool on Perforce. Yep, those got added. Awesome. Alright, so save my scene. Go ahead and hit play. Alright, so I'm able to run around. No, nothing's broken. Looks good. Cool, but I can't yet interact with this. So let's make sure that we get this working. So let's see, I created my objects. I'm going to name these just to keep things organized. Let's call my little block here a control station. Alright, and then let's just name the floor just to keep it consistent. Alright, and one thing to notice, I got this warning, very common, especially new new users to Unity. Unity by default will create a main camera and a directional light in every single scene. But because I just created my character and dropped him in here, there's another camera that's attached to it. So we need to go ahead and delete our main camera. All right, and that'll get rid of this comment that's being spammed over and over again. All right, so we got our objects named. Everything's looking good. Now we need to set up our actual trigger volume. So, it didn't get named. I think I'm not hitting enter. All right, so let's go ahead and add an object to this. So another little shortcut that you can do, so we already talked about parenting and how to group objects together. You can right-click on a certain game object, and you can create an object right underneath it. So let's go ahead and create an empty object inside of this. And you'll notice it immediately puts it right in. So now this object is the child of the control station. And let's name this control trigger. Awesome. And let's go ahead and add a component to this. And we're going to add a sphere collider. All right. Now we just want to go ahead and move this into place. Looks good. Looks like a good size. I'm going to keep it how it is. Move it just slightly around it. Alright, so if you need to mess with it even further, you can use these. If you hit the edit collider, you're going to notice these little squares come up at the certain points. This is going to scale. Clicked off it. This is going to be able to allow you to make the radius smaller or larger with the sphere collider. With a box collider, it's going to move that face in and out. And you can also use right here, using the left and right while you're clicking to make it larger. Also, because this object is a trigger, we want to check this is trigger box here. So without that checked on, you're going to have problems and your script won't work. Alright, so on to the next step. We need to add a script that's going to turn that Boolean we created on and off. That's the basis of where we need to start. Be able to affect that game object, affect this pivot object, and make it be able to be a toggleable thing based on the player's action. So on your control trigger, let's add another component. We're going to add a new script. Okay, so make sure it's C#, and let's call this control turbine. All right, so now I got that script on there. I'm going to double click on it and make sure it's open. Open up Visual Studios. And now inside of the assignment itself, there's the completed version of the script where you can just copy it verbatim and you can get it functioning. I'm going to walk through each line of it as I write it out, and in there as well we've got some really well detailed comments that explain what we're doing at each stage of the way. But I'm just going to walk through it to give you a better understanding of what each line is actually doing. Second here, getting all set up. Alright, so you'll notice at the top of the script we have a few different game objects that we need to create in order to reference certain things in our scene. So the first thing we need to do is we need to reference that pivot object that we've created. So let's create a public game object, and let's call it turbine pivot. Right, that is the pivot object that is powering the turbine. Next, we're going to need to be able to reference the animator of that pivot. So let's create a private animator named pivot anim. And also, we're going to need a Boolean, right? So we're going to tie this Boolean we're creating to the Boolean of the of that pivot object. So that toggle spin Boolean we've created, we're going to set these equal to each other. And let's call this is spinning. All right, so we have our game object, we have our animator, and we have our Boolean. So now that this is a public object, I just like to do this, get in the habit. Don't code too much, and go further on without testing your work and making sure nothing's broken. Just because we just did a few lines there, no need to continue on, or no need to come back. But I'm just going to go ahead, and because we created that, let's make sure that on our trigger object, you're going to notice here that now we have this turbine pivot. Right, now it's looking for a game object. So what we can do is we can go ahead and add our game object. So one way to do that would be to select this small little icon here, and this will open up this window, right? We can go into our scene and grab the object that we want, which is pivot. So there's that object that we want. Another way to do the same thing is to just select the object and drag it into that slot. Right, now it's connected. So let's go back to Unity, or go back to Visual Studios, So now in the start function, we want to define our pivot anim as the pivot's animator component, right? We want to set those equal to each other. So pivot anim, the animator that we just created on line 8. All right, pivot anim equals turbine pivot, right? Because this is that game object right here that we just plugged in for the pivot. Dot get component, because now we want to get the component of that object. Now we need the caret brackets anytime, and it's also a function, so put the parentheses and a semicolon. And now what is the component that we want to get, right? We want to get the animator component. So now pivot anim equals this animator right here that's attached to this pivot object. This pivot object is plugged into the turbine pivot right here. All right, so right when the game starts, we're going to set those equal to each other. All right, and now in our update function, now this is going to happen every single frame, so 60 times a second. We want to set our Boolean equal to each other's, right? So we want to set that toggle spin parameter equal to the is spinning Boolean we just created. So is spinning equals pivot anim dot get bool. All right, and now we're looking for a string in here. So toggle spin. And the reason I knew that was if I hover over get bool, you see in the parentheses it says parentheses string name. So that's how you can know what exactly it is that you want to look for in those parentheses. All right, so that's all we need for our update function. So next we're going to create 3 additional functions. So we're going to need an onTrigger enter, an onTrigger stay, and an onTrigger exit. So let's go ahead and create those. So void onTrigger enter collider entity. Right, curly braces. And I like this formatting like this. Whatever your preference is, but just make sure it's clean and consistent. So I'm going to copy this twice, or copy it and paste it twice, rather. And change this to stay. Change the bottom one to exit. Alright, so now when we enter this trigger, we have the functionality to do things as well as when the player stays in the trigger, or when something stays in the trigger, as well as upon exit, right? So now inside here, so inside the enter, let's just go ahead and let the console know that the player has entered. Let's make sure that things are working properly. So let's go ahead and do if. Let's write an if statement. Entity dot tag double equal sign. So let's compare it and see if it is set to a certain tag. So let's look for the tag player. All right, and now if it is, let's just print some message to the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and write the player has entered the control station. This is just a message for us to know that, hey, so player has entered the volume, making sure that it's working. All right, and don't forget a semicolon at the end of it. All right, I'm going to save. Come back to Unity, and I always like to just save my scene before I play. I've definitely hit times where I've hit play in Unity and everything just crashed. So, good habit to get into. Alright, so now what should happen? I should be able to walk into the volume and the console will pop up a message. Alright, and there it is. You'll see it down at the bottom there, right there, the player has entered the control station. And the reason that is because my character, so I have to open up my character here. This should already be done for you, but if you select the ASCORE character blockout or ASCORE blockout character, you'll notice its tag is set to player. That's why that tag, when it's checking for that tag, it's finding that this object is tagged as player. Alright, back to Unity. Or sorry, back to Visual Studios. So in the onTrigger stay, now we want to be able to press a button while inside this volume and be able to turn on the turbine, right? Or in doing so, we need to turn on and off that Boolean. So if entity.tag, actually I'm just going to go ahead and copy this up here. Work smarter, not harder. Alright, and let's just change this line here to activated the turbine. But in between here, we're going to need a few more lines. So we want to put another if statement inside of it. So if the player has entered the volume and they press the E key and also the Boolean is set to a certain value, execute another function. So if input dot get key up, and let's use key code E because that's the standard interact key, at least for PC. Key code dot E. Okay, so if the player presses E, so if they're in the volume and they're tagged as player and they press E, and we want to check our Boolean. So and is spinning is set to false. Alright, so another if statement. So I think I missed some curly braces. Definitely want to double check my work. So there should be curly braces around here. Okay, now I need curly braces around here. That's my fault. Alright, sorry about that. Alright, so if the entity that enters is tagged as player and they press E and is spinning is set to false, execute something else. So what is this something else? Well, right now it's just going to say that the turbine is activated. Right, so let's just test that, making sure that I didn't screw anything up and I have all my right formatting. Always a good thing. There's some warning there about max. So now if I walk up to it, it tells me that I've entered. Let me see if it happens if I press E. Alright, so that print will keep coming up. So I know that it's functioning how it should. So let's just go back, and now we need to add whatever it is inside here that we want it to do. Right, so what we need to do is we need to set that Boolean. Right, so how do we do that? We want to gain access to this this pivot anim right here, right? Because that's the animator. That's the one that it is we're trying to affect. That's where that parameter is located. So pivot anim dot set bool. Okay. Now same thing. Now if we hover, now this is a function, but if we hover over this, see there it says string name, comma bool value. So we need to have a string for what the name of it is, as well as what we want it to be set to. So we need to write, let's see, we named it toggle spin. Make sure it's lowercase t, capital S, and you can go back to Unity and double check. Make sure your naming is exactly the same. And now we want to set this to true, because that's when it's set to true, that's what's going to make it transition to that other state. All right, so let's go ahead and try that out. Oh, looks like can't work, so I missed a semicolon. Yep, silly mistake. But Unity's definitely very friendly with letting you know you've made a mistake. All right, error's gone. Walk up to it, it says I'm there, press E, and it starts turning on. Awesome, exactly what I want. Activated the turbine. But now I can't turn it off. But just to double check, if I go ahead and open my animator window, just to show you what's going on, let's select that pivot object and go to the scene, tear this off, just have these side by side, just so you can see that parameter changing. So you'll notice right now it's still in that idle state. Toggle spin is set to false. I walk up to it, and I press E. Now it's checked on. Now I transition to the spinning state. Press E again. Nothing's happening. Still in that spinning state. Toggle spin is still off. So all we need to do now is set it back the other direction, right? So we can copy this whole function here, or this whole if statement. Still paste it inside of this if entity.tag is set to player. Still want to make it inside this if statement. But all we need to do here is set these values opposite of each other. So if the player presses E and is spinning is true, set is spinning to false. And that's just right, has deactivated the turbine. All right. And just while we're here, always a good idea to give yourself more feedback and more messages, just so you know when certain things are happening. So I'm just going to real quickly in here grab this, grab that if statement, paste it in. So just making sure the player has left. So just a good habit to get into. You know, if you want certain events to happen on these different times, this is why you would have these different functions going on. One common mistake I've seen, and one thing to keep note of, is you don't want to put all of this information about pressing E on an on-trigger enter. The reason is the player only enters a trigger at one frame. So the frame they enter, they have to press E at that exact second. Really, really hard to do because, you know, a frame is 1/60th of a second. So you have to have perfect timing. As soon as you enter, you're pressing E. Otherwise, it's never going to enter again until an exit fires. So they will never happen. But stay is going to happen the entire time the player is inside the trigger volume. So let's go ahead and save this. Go back to Unity. All right, and let's give it another test. Okay, so walk up to the control panel. It lets me know I'm there. Press E. Start spinning. Press E again, and it turns off. And there we go. I see it. I've deactivated. Now, if I walk out of the volume, it tells me the player has left the control station. Perfect. So right now we're just printing commands to the console. So in the upcoming months, you're going to start to learn how to print those messages to the screen. But right now, putting in those print lines are really, really important because it helps us test without having full functionality in there. So really make good use of those print functions now, and then moving forward you'll be able to give the player all that feedback to the screen and inside the immersive world. So now that we've got the movement working just how we want it, we want to make sure that we have some sound effects, some feedback to go along with this. So what we want to do is set up some audio sources to make sure that the player understands when they're doing these certain actions. So on here, let's go ahead and add a component, and let's add an audio source. And then we're going to do this on the control trigger itself. All right, so add an audio source here. All right, and let's go ahead and here is this audio clip. This is what sound is actually going to be played. So if we click on the little circle there, this is going to open up all of the sounds we have. We have those two that we added in from the project, or sorry, from the package. All right, and let's go ahead and select the click sound effect. So a few properties we can adjust here. Make sure you turn off play on awake. What this means is as soon as the level starts that the sound effect is going to start playing. We don't want that. We want it to happen when we tell it to. Also, we have Unity is very awesome. It has a lot of really cool 3D sound settings. So feel free to look into this further. If you click on this little help here, you can read about all these different properties and what they actually mean and how you can adjust them, things like that, how you can control them through a script. But let's just go ahead and turn up this minimum distance for the 3D sound. Let's see, just adjust it to about. So we want just about the size of our collider. I'm just going to go ahead and make it about 3, 2. See, our collider's 0.5. Yeah, that's good. So feel free to mess with those settings as much as you can. You know, if that's something you really enjoy, it's definitely an immersive thing, sound engineering. But now we want to go ahead and give the functionality to the script to be able to play these certain sound effects. So in order to do this, we need to find that component, this audio source. So same way that we did before with the pivot anim, finding this, we need to do the same thing but just for the audio. So let's go ahead and in our script add a private audio source. Let's call it control audio. Okay, and now one thing to note here is because the because this audio source is on the same object that this script is attached to, we can just write get component because Turbine pivot is referencing another game object. We can just find the same component on this game object, right? So we can just get component and find the audio source. All right, and we want to do that on start function. So as soon as it happens, we find that. And now we just want to play this sound effect at the correct time. So when do we want the sound effect to play? When the player enters the trigger volume? No, we don't want to do it when the we don't want to do it when the player enters the volume or when they stay in the volume. We want to do it when they press E and it starts to actually spin. So inside here, right underneath our print, we're just going to write control audio dot play. Alright, and then let's go ahead and just copy this line and paste it down here so when they turn it on, they hear the click sound effect. When they turn it off, they also hear the click sound effect. Right, let's go ahead and save that. Let's go back to Unity and just test it out. Make sure everything's working. And before we do it, I'm just going to save the scene. All right, hit play. All right. All right, you hear that click when I turn it on, and if I try to turn it off, you hear the click and it turns off. Awesome, just how I wanted it to. So now the next thing we want to do is we just want to add that wind sound effect. So here to actually hear like a humming noise when the player is um, actually listening to the audio. So let's go and just like we did before, let's put this one on our pivot object. And now let's go ahead and add a component, another audio source. All right, and now in here we're going to add our wind loop. All right, so here we want to make sure that we set our sound effect to looping and turn off play on awake. We don't want it to play right away. All right, and now we want to make our sound effect just about the same size as the blades of the wind turbine. And the blades are about um, 3 units long, so scaled in the Y, 3 units. So let's just go ahead and make it 4. Alright, so we got our audio source. Everything looks good there. So now in our script, we want to go ahead and reference this component. So just like before we did for the other audio source, I'm just going to copy this. And so since this audio source is on our pivot object, I'm just going to call this pivot audio. So now we want to reference this the same way we did the animator, right? So because it's on another object, it's on the pivot, which is attached to this game object. So I can copy this line, and I'm going to paste it right below. And now I'm just going to change animator to audio source. So because the script is on the same game object as the audio sources, this is why we only have to write get component here. But because we're referencing the turbine, and this is wrong, we got to make sure this is pivot audio. That's why it was giving me an error. So because this is on a different object, we write turbine pivot, which right here is a game object, dot get component. So important difference to note. All right, and now in here, just like we did before, I'm going to copy this line, and we're going to have it start playing when the player turns on the wind turbine. And now, instead of having it continually play when they turn it off, we want it to turn it off. So instead, we want it to stop. So if you don't know the different things you're allowed to do after a dot, you can hit Control Space, and it'll bring up a list. So we could pause it, we could play it, we could delay it, play one shot, so it'll play through one time. But what we want is stop. So we could scroll through the list and find stop. And that should be good to go. So let's go ahead and save. Make sure your volume's turned up, and let's go ahead and do one final test. So I'm going to go ahead and save the scene and the project and give it a shot. Alright, I hear the wind blowing through my hair. Sounds awesome. If I try and turn it off, I hear the click and the wind stops. Awesome. So that is the completed all 3 experiments walking you through the wind turbine. So now walking through this, you now have all the understanding you need to walk through the entryway, no pun intended. So if you have any questions in regard to that, feel free to contact your instructor about doing so. And at this point, definitely make sure you come back to Perforce and reconcile offline work. I'm going to do it from my wind turbine. All right, and it found I made a change to my scene. So I've been doing it from my turbine experiments because I was staying as organized as I could the whole time and trying to keep everything in place. You may have to, reconcile work from your assets folder if you have things in different locations. But definitely make sure you're submitted everything to your working folder, and then be sure to submit your entryway into the compiled folder. All right, got everything submitted. Oh, one other thing to note, and by me just reconciling there, I had missed it. You have to add um, the meta file for the folder as well. So that's one thing you would benefit from reconciling from your assets, but it may just take a bit longer. All right, but that's all I have to cover here. So yet again, feel free to contact your instructor if you have any other questions, and have a good day.